Director of the UCLA Center for Policy Research on Aging, and Adjunct Professor of Gerontology at USC. And he will provide an overview on what the future will bring in terms of the populations that our cities will be serving. So I ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Fernando Torres-Gil.
Testing, testing. Thank you. Testing. Can I be heard in the back? Testing, testing. Can I be heard over there? Testing, testing. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. You don't really know me, and you may or may not be interested in issues like getting old and getting older, nor might you be aware that our demographic world is changing dramatically. But I hope to give you some insights into what it means for your communities, for the South Bay, for your communities, and for you individually, and certainly your families. If I gave you a headline, it would be this: by 2050, perhaps by 2042, the United States of America will have twice as many persons 65 years of age and over. At the same time, the United States will become majority minority, where no one group is a majority and non-Hispanic whites are in the minority. We call that the aging of a majority minority nation. But we don't have to wait till 2046 or 2042. The future is here. Certainly we know it. California now has the largest number of older persons, 65 and over. Maybe not as high as percentage as Florida, but at least in terms of absolute numbers, California has the largest senior citizen population. And California is a majority minority state. And Latinos and Asians in particular are slated to be our largest ethnic minority groups. But we already know that here in Southern California, in Los Angeles County. So I will address what it means for your local communities in terms of planning, housing, transportation, and what it means in terms of what we refer to as age-friendly cities. But first, a personal background. First, I loved the history and the earlier panel looking at those great postcards. And it reminds me that my family, my mother was born and raised in Los Angeles. They ultimately, in the 30s and 40s, moved to the city of San Gabriel, the San Gabriel Valley, when it was rural and relatively agricultural. And she always told the stories about the red car and how she and her family would take it to go to the beaches. And the beaches were the South Bay beaches. And she always lamented that we lost the red cars. She's passed away, but I think she would be pleased that we're trying to expand that public transit system along some of those old lines. My wife and I, we live in Northeast Los Angeles, Highland Park in particular, just a really cool area, for better or worse, going through gentrification. But the South Bay, I know, is real special. It's just an amazing place. And I know it because I've been on several commissions that bookend the South Bay area. And I've come to know some of the issues, some of the great opportunities, and some of the politics. For a number of years, I was on the Los Angeles Harbor Commission, and so working actively with the ports of LA and the ports of Long Beach. And most recently, I served 8 years on the Los Angeles Airport Commission, overseeing LAX and Van Nuys and Ontario and Palmdale, and certainly came to know some of the issues that were spoken of earlier. So this is a real special place, and it's a pleasure to be here with you and to speak to some of the issues of aging. And as I walked in, some of you may have noticed that I have a disability, I am Latino, and I am a senior citizen. So I represent 3 fundamental trends that will be represented in your communities, the aging of your communities, its diversity and growing diversity, and what does it mean to age in place and to hope to have a long life, and as we refer to in geriatrics, a quality of life that leads to the end of life. And that is all about having this longer lifespan and living it out in our communities. Here are some of the, I think, premises and some of the issues relevant to aging and diversity and living out that long lifespan. And I'll just paraphrase it simply like this. Most individuals want to stay in their communities as they grow older. Secondly, you want those individuals to stay in your communities as they grow older. So one of your policy, planning, future, and political questions, whether you're elected officials, advocates, leaders in your community, how do you keep persons as they grow older in your communities and with the quality of life which allows them to maintain some level of independence and dignity as they live out that lifespan? Backtracking a little bit, there is much said about people moving out of California. And in fact, there is an out-migration. And there are many stories about those of us who are fortunate to own homes here in the Southland, in the South Bay in LA, you know, taking, as we retire, selling our homes and taking the equity and moving to Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, and buying a gorgeous mansion for $250,000 and living the rest of your life on the rest of your equity that you cashed out by selling your home here in the area for $1, $2, $3 million. I mean, those stories, by the way, are essentially just observational, meaning, yes, there are those who, when they retire from Southern California, Los Angeles, the South Bay, will sell their homes, cash out, and head out to some other part of the country. The reality is that most individuals stay in their communities when they retire and want to age in place in their communities. Roughly 85 to 90% of us will, if we are able, when we retire and get older, age in place in our communities. So most senior citizens will have stayed. Some will have cashed out and moved out, but we're talking about those that want to stay. So what are the issues facing those that want to age in place? And there are several, and I'll just list them and then come back to them rather quickly. First of all, can they stay in their home safely? Do their homes have the safety? Do they have the accessibility? Are they reconfigured for aging in place with the disability? Most of us, by the time we hit our 70s and 80s, will have some type of disability. It's just the way of the world, whether it's physical, hearing, visual, emotional. All of us will have some type of limitation as we grow older. Of course, most of us want to be like Peter Pan, and we hope that we'll be 90 years old and like Jane Fonda after about 20 surgeries, and we'll look and act like we're 21. And for better or worse, most of the advertisement and marketing is about aging to 90 and 100 with the body that's about 25, 30, or 40 years old. I mean, that's kind of the fallacy in that part of the marketing towards an older population. But we have to accept the reality that all of us will face some type of limitation related to a chronic condition or a disability. That doesn't mean that life isn't good and enjoyable. In fact, it can be and will be. But it really comes down to one central question: how can we age in place in our homes and in our communities so that as we go through that life cycle, that we will be able to still enjoy and stay in that place? And that's one of the central questions that planners and local officials must address. And there are a number of things that go with that. First of all, of course, is having the resources to remodel your home, to widen the doors, grab bars in the bathroom, the ability to have a wheelchair that you can use and come in and out. And so all the issues about home modification. Many older persons, even if they're relatively secure in retirement, will reach a point in their life cycle, which is what we refer to as house rich and cash poor. House rich and cash poor. A spend down of your resources, but your home is still worth a lot, and that brings in other issues such as reverse annuity mortgages. So how to stay in your home. Second, transportation, and that was mentioned here. One thing I know about the South Bay is that it is still relatively suburban. It still depends heavily on getting in a vehicle and driving and going to a destination. One of the areas in aging that sadly is highly correlated with isolation, depression, and in extreme circumstances, suicide among the elderly is the loss of a driver's license, the inability to drive your vehicle, which suddenly at that stage in life creates a sense of helplessness or dependency on others. And we have to accept the fact that most of us will not be able to drive at a certain point in time. Fortunately, there are ways to alleviate that. Public transit, buses, light rail, subway is certainly one way, although as we get older and with different types of mobility limitations, even buses become difficult. And that gets to the issues of on-demand transportation, Uber and Lyft, which is really a tremendous godsend for those of us who don't want to deal with buses. But then many of us are hoping for autonomous vehicles, which I think has tremendous potential. Certainly it helps those who want to avoid DUIs, but it will also be very important for older individuals who cannot drive and are not able to access public transit and the ability to have door-to-door services. So there are some potentials with technology. The other aspect to consider is the issue of public safety. And as one gets older, the fears and insecurities about crime, whether real or imagined, becomes an issue, and beginning to address that. And the fourth area is what we refer to as home and community-based long-term care, or caregiving. Perhaps one of the growing crises in the aging of our populations. As we live longer and grow older, eventually we will need assistance. We will need assistance with what we call the ADLs, bathing, toileting, transfer, dressing, eating, etc. And then it comes down to who can assist you, who can help you. Most of us have this fantasy that as we get older and we need help, that our children will be there for us. That's assuming you have children. That's assuming you get along with your children. That's assuming you're willing to move in with your children. That's assuming your kids are even around geographically or given their own work, family demands to be available to you. Most persons growing older that have children find that children are not the resource that they had expected for a variety of reasons. Then the next question for local communities and planners and elected officials is, where will the long-term care workforce come from? Who can be hired to provide personal companionship, assistance with the ADLs, accompanying an older person to meetings and volunteer work? And there we're beginning to face an issue in the aging of a society becoming majority-minority. Most of our workforce has been dependent on low-income minority women and immigrants, legal and undocumented. In the current national climate, and we won't get into the politics from the White House, et cetera, and the debates around immigration reform, we are finding that there's a growing shortage of immigrants and refugees that have been the traditional basis for the long-term care workforce. So one of the issues we will all face in the South Bay and in many municipalities and metropolitan areas is a growing shortage of in-home supportive services workers, individuals that can be those caregivers that enable persons to stay in their home with some kind of assistance. So these are the challenges that we face. There are initiatives you will want to consider that are attempting to address this issue of how do you age in your community and your home with the measure of independence and the quality of life. There is what we call the village movement, which is a system of reciprocity where individuals and neighbors come together and through formal or informal understandings, you know, I'll drive you to your doctor's appointment if you'll come and change the light bulbs. It's essentially a system of reciprocity. There's a very active one in Palos Verdes and Rancho Palos Verdes, and you may want to consider that. It's a way of neighbors helping neighbors through this village movement, this system of reciprocity. Age-friendly and age-friendly cities. AARP designates cities as age-friendly after they've gone through a long process of evaluation and site visits. In Los Angeles is striving to get theirs. A number of communities are working here in the Southern California area to be designated age-friendly cities. And those are the ones that have a very public commitment through their elected officials to address the issues of housing and transportation, access, and public safety, and caregiving, the various issues that I have mentioned. And then there are the blue zone cities, and I believe one or two of those cities are here in the South Bay, that are those cities where there's a high level of healthy aging among the older population. That's about exercise and nutrition and clean air. So there are initiatives that are encouraging and working with municipalities to make it possible to age in one's community as one grows older. And so we're all hopeful that the South Bay will continue to be a vibrant, economically prosperous, great destination as it has always been. There's been references to congestion and traffic and infrastructure and airports and harbors. Let us not forget that those infrastructures, in fact, is what provides the high-paid jobs and allows for a measure of economic stability. But let us also remember that ultimately we want older persons to stay in our communities and to age in place. They tend to be the large proportion of volunteers. They are the key voters because they are more likely to register and to vote on a regular basis. Where you have large proportions of older adults, you have lower rates of crime. Something about you grow older, you calm down, and you behave yourself. And older adults are also, and I'll end it with this and the postcards, older adults, which is many of us here in this room, we are the legacy of a community. We are the intergenerational links with the past. And older adults is what reminds us, as your archivists and your librarians here have told us, that once upon a time there was a past and there is a present, and with that elder segment of your population, it will be the bridge to the future and retaining that great history of the South Bay. So I've shared these thoughts, and let me just leave it with this. The demographic reality is that the South Bay will grow older. It is diverse and will become more diverse. And most of your residents will want to stay in your communities. And now your challenge and your opportunity is to make it possible for them to do so. Thank you very much, and I believe I'm open for a few questions. Thank you. And who will MC the questions? Hi. And do speak loud so we can all hear. Thank you.
Hi. I just wanted to add to what you spoke about the village program. There's also a very vibrant village program called South Bay Village. And guess where it is? In the South Bay. Just wanted to add that to your
Oh, excellent.
comment.
Thank you for mentioning that. I've been
welcome.
to Rancho PV and PV, and I've met some of those, but it's great to know there's another one here.
Thank you.
And
Please expand it.
And Jess is the executive director of South Bay Village and is doing such a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, and do expand them. Very important.
Hello. My name is Jim Deere, former mayor of the city of Carson for over a decade, and retired 3 years ago and came back and got elected to city council. So I'm on the council now, and I'd like to know if you have some suggestions other than building more senior affordable housing, other suggestions you might have for municipalities in the South Bay to take proactive efforts to guarantee the quality of life of our senior citizens.
Two things, and hopefully I'll answer your question directly. I think you're referring to various options for living arrangements.
Yes.
And living in your home and growing older in your home, even with the best caregiving, long-term care supports, and making your home accessible, is not for everyone. And it is not always the most efficient way to age. We call it the continuum of care, which ranges from adult day centers to assisted living facilities to CCR, continuing care, retirement communities, to group homes. There's a variety of ways to age and still age in your community and to be able to have the supports other than the home. We find that for a lot of older adults, staying in your home is real expensive and isolating. And you no longer have the social interactions. And for some of us, being in a retirement facility, and there are a number here in the South Bay, and I've had friends that have been, older friends that have been in CCCRs in Manhattan Beach and Redondo Beach, and they're excellent. Most of those tend to be for-profit and very, very expensive. And there are nonprofit, faith-based ones. So I would suggest to do almost a needs assessment. What's available in your communities that provide the different options for that continuum of care? And if I can give us all advice for planning ahead, all of us individually should plan ahead for a longevity that will give us to up to 100 years of age. And what happens if this happens or this scenario occurs? In my part, I'll just say this, my wife and I have a beautiful home in the hills of Highland Park. But I know with my disability, that's not gonna work for me when I can no longer drive. Fortunately, we were smart enough to buy a condo in downtown Los Angeles 30 years ago, which is right across from the Walt Disney Concert Hall. I have my motorized scooter there. I can go to the outdoor places. I can still drink and drive my motorized scooter because it's not yet illegal, but it will be someday. And I'll end with this. I know with my disability, even that might not be enough, so we're already looking at our own continuing care retirement communities, and they have some very good ones in South Pasadena and Boyle Heights. So I think what you're getting at is what's available in your community, how do you promote the options? But I will say this, it's not always easy to have these senior options. In some communities, adult day health centers, assisted living facilities are considered LULUs. Do we know what a LULU is? A locally undesirable land use, LULUs,
yes,
which causes reactions by neighbors against having something like that in your neighborhood for a whole lot of, I think, unfounded fears. So the point is, sort out what are the options. It's not just in your home. How can you encourage their development? How can you maintain them in your community? Thank you.
Thank you for that segue with the Lulus. My concern as I age in my community, which is a blue zone community of Redondo Beach.
Excellent, yes.
Is that, you know, I as much as anyone else, does not like the state stepping in to wrest local control in terms of some of those land use issues. However, what would your advice be to a Lulu community in terms of infrastructure enhancements that are necessary. I know the metro is coming through, hopefully through Redondo Beach soon, but in addition to that, because I hear you say where you live and you've got your motorized scooter, you can go here, there, and pretty much move with ease throughout your community. I want to make sure that we'll be able to do that, and what advice would you have? Thank you.
I know this may not be popular with some of you, but I think Governor Newsom and some of the state legislatures, I think are onto something that's important for all of us. It's not just addressing the housing crisis and homelessness. It's also addressing the need to have alternate housing arrangements as we age and allow us to age in place. Many of us will find that it's better to downsize from a large single family home, move into apartment or studio that's part of a cluster of other, high density units, but that also allows you to walk or use your motorized scooter or get in your wheelchair or your walker and not have to go far to go to a store to meet with neighbors. In your South Bay, you have very few of those, except right along the beach, which are very expensive. So to the extent public transit, subways, light rails come into your area, yes, in fact, I think we have to accept and support the need to use those stops for high-density housing, but to ensure that a portion of that housing is for low-income and older adults, and that it is designed in terms of land use so that it can have retail, it can have services, it can even have a senior citizen center, an adult day center, an assisted living facility, so they can do here what I hope to do in downtown Los Angeles. Just within 5-6 blocks, I've got everything I need. I don't have to drive. People can come visit. But I believe the South Bay has to look at that as part of their landscape. And I don't think you have sufficient amount of that given the aging of your population. We have to accept that.
Right.
Thank you.
Hi, Professor. I share your vision for extensive longevity beyond 100. My question is, for your Center of Public Research on Aging, do you have someone who fits the bill of futurist senior life coach, who's not really interested in insurance options, Medicare, long-term care facilities, but for a vibrant woman in her 60s, 70s, 80s, as to how to find the right place to live, what's going to happen in our community, to eliminate the isolation issues? Does your center offer anyone like that? I've never heard of it.
We do to a certain extent through our UCLA Center on Longevity. I'm the associate director. But we're focused more on working with families who have elders with dementias and Alzheimer's, and we work with the family to kind of do the adapt and adjust to the changing needs and circumstances that families have for caregiving. What you're really asking is a life coach in longevity. There are few of those available. Some of them tend to call themselves care managers or care coordinators, but they're really more about where can you go if you can't take care of mom type of stuff. I think the quick response is, there are very few people that will give you that honest, comprehensive, holistic approach, and I've given you some ideas for that. Sadly, there's a lot of people coming into this business. Some of them used to sell real estate, some of them used to sell all kinds of silly products, and now they call themselves life planners to assist you. Be very careful about who is going to advise you to live out your life. This is a whole new world. We've never had that opportunity to live to be centenarian, so we don't have the resources you're asking for. We're going to need them. I will take that seriously. Thank you. And I believe our time is up.
Oh, I think we have time for one more, if you don't mind. Okay, one last person.
Hello, my name's Star Van Buren. I work for El Camino College at the Small Business Development Center. So we assist businesses to start or grow. And I used to work in financial services, and I also own a business with my husband that's a tax and accounting. So I just want to make a comment that as business owners, or even just you know, a person who worked, to plan for your financial needs. Have a will, and if you have kids, maybe discuss the distribution of property ahead of time, because what we see is if you don't, there's a lot of infighting among your relatives. Also, if you do not have family and you don't have a will, then the state will come in and take everything you have. I saw that with a state employee who was kind of an eccentric lady. She had a house her parents had built and was kind of falling down around her. And she passed away, and I was in charge of operations, so I had to find out, you know, it was a dormant account. I sent one of my people out there to look, and there was a note from the state saying, if anybody comes to the house, please contact us. She had a large retirement, she owned that property, but did not have a will, so the state took everything that she had. So please, you know, whether you're a business owner or not, plan for that. Nobody likes to think about writing a will, because then you think it's kind of superstitious. I don't want to have a will. Something might happen, but you really do need to have that.
Let me say amen to that. And the stories about children fighting over your home or your resources and your hard-earned savings going to probate, and the breakup of families over the lack of a will or a trust are legion. It happens. And if I can reinforce your advice, the best time to plan for your later years is when you're young and middle age, and you should be sitting down with your children or your partners or those you trust. And first of all, as you said, it's at trust, it's at living will, it's all the documents if you become incapacitated. And just know, especially in Southern California with the value of housing, nothing breaks up a family more than fighting over that house.
Yeah.
And so thank you very much for that.
The only other comment I made is if you have a business, have an exit strategy, because, you know, things happen. You don't want your business to just fall apart after all your years of hard work. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Torres-Gil, and join me in thanking him one more time.